What happens when the man who owns the cafe chain has to wear an apron and clean spilled oat milk off the floor just to figure out what's really going wrong? Julian Vega stood in the back of the delivery van, zipping up his hoodie and pulling the cap down low over his eyes. It was barely 6 a.m., and the sun hadn't even broken past the buildings yet. He glanced at the mirror mounted inside the van. His beard was thicker now, hair dyed a bit darker, and glasses added a touch of nervous barista in training. He looked nothing like the polished CEO he normally was. He had taken over the cafe chain 3 years ago after his father passed away. There were 5 locations, total small, cozy spots that had once been known for their warmth and honesty. But lately, something fell off. Reviews were slipping. Customers complained about rude service and inconsistent food. But when he brought it up during meetings, the district manager just brushed it off. People complain on the internet for fun. It's nothing. Julian didn't like guesses. He wanted truth. That's why he was here, undercover, posing as a new hire for barista training under the name Eli. He'd rotate through all 5 stores over the next 2 weeks, starting with the cafe on Maple and 6th. It was the busiest one and apparently the training hub for new staff. He walked in, head down, and was immediately hit by the smell of burnt espresso. A tall woman with a tight ponytail and a clipboard looked him up and down. "You the new guy?"
Yeah.
"Eli," Julian said, keeping his voice a little higher than usual.
I'm Jess.
"I'm the manager here," she said, not offering a handshake. "Drop your bag in the back. We've got a full house today." Julian headed to the back room, catching sight of a young server nervously tying her apron. She looked barely 20. Jess barked louder. "Let's move, people. Late orders again, and I'm not getting chewed out by district." Julian spent the first few hours watching and listening. Jess was sharp, but her tone was harsh. She didn't talk to the crew, she talked at them. Any mistake, even tiny ones, got snapped at. But what struck him most was how the workers seemed scared rather than lazy. Everyone was walking on eggshells. He was shown the ropes by a guy named Theo, who'd been working there for over a year. "Don't take it personal," Theo said as he showed Julian how to froth oat milk. "Jess is always like this. Just do what she says and don't try to reason with her." Julian nodded. "Why do you stay?" Theo glanced around. "Honestly, my sister's in college. I'm helping cover her books. This job's not my dream, but it helps." Julian respected that. Later that day, a woman with a toddler walked in. She looked exhausted but kind, and the kid, maybe 4, was bouncing with energy. "Hi," she said gently to the cashier, a girl named Lucy. "Can I ask, does the banana muffin have any tree nuts? My son's allergic." Before Lucy could answer, Jess stepped out from behind the counter, waving her off. "It doesn't. You're fine." Lucy hesitated. I think it might be made in the same," Jess cut in, voice sharp. "I said it's fine. Just ring her up." Julian stiffened. He felt the words freeze in his throat. The mother looked unsure but trusted the manager. "Okay. I'll take one, thanks." Julian watched the interaction like it was in slow motion. The muffin was handed over. The little kid smiled. No one else seemed to care. In the back, Julian leaned against the sink, heart racing. Jess had just told her server to lie about allergy ingredients. That wasn't just careless, it was dangerous. Theo came in and saw his face. "Everything all right?" "I just need a minute," Julian said, gripping the edge of the sink. He couldn't believe what he'd seen. If that kid had eaten that muffin and something had happened. He didn't even want to finish the thought. He stayed quiet the rest of the shift, watching how Jess barked orders, dismissed concerns, and shamed employees for asking questions. Lucy looked shaken. She kept glancing at the door like she hoped the woman would come back. She didn't. Julian went home that night, sat on the edge of his couch, and stared at the floor for a long time. He had 5 stores. If this was happening here, what else was going unnoticed? He had to keep going. The next store was across town, but his mind was still stuck on that muffin. He didn't sleep much that night. Julian arrived at the second location, Broadway and Elm, just before sunrise. The building had more glass than brick, and the inside glowed faintly with soft pendant lights. The shift lead, a man named Devin, unlocked the door and waved him in without much of a greeting. Julian walked through quietly, eyes scanning for signs of life. There were 2 employees already inside. One was restocking cups. The other was hunched over the pastry case, trying to fix the flickering light inside. "Eli, right?" Devin asked, flipping through a clipboard. His voice was flat, mechanical. "You'll be on register today. Don't mess up the drawer, and don't talk too much. We have a lot of regulars who hate delays." Julian nodded. Devin didn't offer a tour or introductions. He just pointed to the apron rack and walked off, already tapping something into his phone. The first few hours went by in a blur. The team was small, just 5 people total, and they moved like parts of an old machine. Functional, but tired. People spoke in clipped phrases. No music played. No one laughed. Julian was partnered on register with a woman named Ava. She looked like she'd been there too long and slept too little. Her hands moved fast, but her eyes were dull, and she didn't make eye contact with customers unless she had to. "You knew?" she asked between orders.
Yeah. Ellie.
"Just started this week." She nodded once. "Don't bother getting comfortable." "What do you mean?" She reached under the counter for a new sleeve of lids. "People come and go. No one stays unless they have to. Devin doesn't train. He just expects you to know, and if you mess up, he calls you out in front of everyone." Julian observed the crew carefully. One barista, Malik, looked younger than the rest, but had a quiet rhythm to the way he worked. His drinks were precise, and he wiped down his station every few minutes without being asked. But every time he glanced toward Devin, his shoulders tensed slightly. It wasn't long before Julian saw why. A customer, a middle-aged man in a blazer, came in and ordered a cappuccino, no foam. Malik handed over the drink a couple of minutes later with a polite nod. "This is foam," the man snapped, holding the cup up like it was contaminated. Malik leaned forward. "I flattened it as much as I could, but cappuccinos usually have some." "I said no foam." "Can you read?" Julian's stomach dropped. He waited for Devin to step in. But Devin didn't move from where he was lounging by the pickup counter. He just glanced up, then away, like he'd seen this before and didn't see a reason to interfere. "I can remake it," Malik said, voice tight. The man didn't say thanks. He just looked past him and muttered something under his breath that Julian couldn't quite hear. But Malik's jaw clenched, and his eyes flicked to the floor for a second too long. Julian turned to Ava. "He's just going to let that happen?" Ava didn't look up from the register. Every time. By mid-afternoon, the tension in the store had grown thick. Malik stayed quiet after the foam incident, barely speaking except when calling out orders. Julian caught him rubbing the back of his neck more than once, like the weight of the day was pressing into his skin. Things hit a boiling point when a newer hire, a soft-spoken girl named Camila, accidentally dropped a full tray of clean mugs. The crash echoed through the cafe like a fire alarm. Every head turned. Devin stormed out from the back, eyes already narrowed. "What are you doing?" he barked. "Do you even know how to carry a tray?" Camila bent down, hands shaking as she picked up the first piece of ceramic. "I'm sorry, you're sorry? These aren't cheap. You think we have money to waste on your mistakes." Julian stepped forward instinctively, but Ava grabbed his sleeve lightly. He looked at her. "Don't," she said under her breath. "He'll just make it worse for her." Devin didn't stop. "You're lucky I don't dock your hours.
Clean it up fast."
"We have customers watching." Camila nodded quickly, blinking hard. She didn't say another word. Julian watched her clean with trembling hands, sweeping shards into a dustpan while Devin stood nearby, arms crossed. That night, Julian stayed after close under the pretense of helping with the register count. The cafe had emptied out, and the staff moved like ghosts through the final tasks. He caught Malik wiping down the espresso machine, his eyes red around the edges. "Hey," Julian said quietly. "You okay?" Malik gave a barely there nod.
Yeah.
"Just a long day." Julian didn't push. Instead, he walked over to Camila, who was restocking napkins by the sink. "You did good today," he said gently. She looked up, startled. "I dropped a dozen mugs." "You dropped dishes. That's not the same as doing bad." She hesitated. "Devin said if I mess up again, I'm off Friday's schedule." Julian felt something tighten in his chest. Did he write that down?
No.
He just said it. The next morning, Julian didn't go to the third location. He drove straight to HQ instead. He walked through the front door, past the receptionist who barely recognized him in his disguise, and straight up to the second floor. When he stepped into the operations office, the district manager, Tony, looked up in surprise. "You're back early," Tony said. "Something wrong with the rotation?" Julian pulled off his cap and set it on the desk. "I just watched a manager humiliate one employee and threaten another's hours. I watched a barista get verbally abused by a customer, and no one stepped in. And I watched a team of 5 people work a full shift with 0 support." Tony blinked. "Which location?" "Broadway and Elm." Tony leaned back in his chair. "Devin's been with us a while. He runs a tight ship. Maybe he was just having an off day." Julian's voice stayed level.
No.
He wasn't. He created that environment. And based on everyone's behavior, it wasn't new. Tony opened his mouth again, but Julian cut him off.
He's done.
"Today." Tony hesitated. "Should I speak with HR first?"
No.
"I'll speak with them. You notify him his employment is terminated, effective immediately. And I want a review of every other manager's conduct across all sites. I'm not walking into another store and watching this happen again." Tony swallowed and nodded. Julian paused in the doorway. "And find out how long Malik's been there. He deserves better than what I saw." Back in his car, Julian sat for a long time, face blank. He'd built this company with the idea that it could be more than just another coffee chain. But somewhere along the line, that idea had been handed off to people who didn't share it. He wasn't just going to fire one person and move on. He opened a notebook from the glove box and started writing names. People who needed to be heard. People who needed to be seen. Camila. Malik.
Ava.
He had 3 more stores to visit. And he wasn't done yet. Julian stepped into the third Café Pine and Hollis on a gray Thursday morning. The windows were fogged from the inside, warm air fighting early autumn rain. The moment he crossed the threshold, he felt the difference. The space was quieter than it should have been, not in a peaceful way, but in a strained one. The espresso machine hissed inconsistently, and the pastry case was barely stocked 2 dry croissants on the top shelf and a few wrapped cookies below. A customer waited at the register, tapping a credit card against her palm while the barista, a young man with restless hands, fumbled with the POS system. Julian joined the line behind her, keeping his eyes open. When the woman finally reached the front, she leaned in slightly. "Do you have soy milk today?" The barista hesitated. "I think we're
out."
"Maybe. Let me check." The woman glanced at her watch. "I don't have time to wait." She exited without ordering. A short man in a faded green zip-up emerged from the back and waved Julian over. "You're Eli?" Julian nodded. "Name's Kurt. I'm lead here today." The manager called out sick again. "Is she okay?" Kurt blew air through his teeth. "Don't know. Doesn't answer texts." "Come on, I'll show you where we keep the aprons." In the back, Julian saw why things were off. One person was doing prep, another was trying to roast a batch of beans, and the one he'd seen at the register, Jason, was also supposed to be taking online orders. There were only 4 people on staff, including Kurt. That wasn't enough. You always run this late? Julian asked quietly as he pulled an apron over his hoodie. Since August. We're supposed to have 7. But no one sticks around. Can't blame them. Kurt's face was pale under the fluorescent lights. The first hour passed in a blur of missed orders and half apologies. Julian ran drinks, trying to help Jason catch his breath. The printer didn't stop spitting tickets. People waited too long for lattes that never came. One customer asked for a refund after 20 minutes and left without saying another word. At one point, Kurt stepped out to take a call. When he came back, his jaw was tight. That was district, he muttered as he passed Julian. They're sending someone to observe tomorrow. Like we're the problem. Julian didn't respond. He was watching Jason try to pull a shot with a portafilter that clearly wasn't locking in right. The machine coughed and spit hot water. Jason flinched and stepped back. You okay? Julian asked, moving in. It's busted. Been like that for a week. We put in a repair request. Nobody came. Julian frowned. What do you do when it fails like that? Jason wiped his hands on his apron. I just switch to the other group head and hope no one notices the taste difference. Julian looked at the other machine, a dual-head La Marzocco. The right side was covered in dried milk buildup. That one working? Sometimes. Only if you hold the lever halfway up while pulling the shot. It's dumb. Julian stared at the machine, then at the repair request form taped to the side of the fridge. It was dated 2 weeks ago. He turned to Kurt. You've been reporting this? Weekly. Got the emails if you need proof. Julian didn't answer. He just nodded and went back to running drinks. His eyes stayed sharp. Every corner of the store seemed to hold a story. Around noon, a man in a black polo polished walked in and scanned the room like he owned it. His name tag said Colby Regional Oversight. He didn't greet anyone, just walked straight to the back. A minute later, Kurt was called in. Julian kept his distance, but listened closely when Kurt returned. He said, "We're losing money here," Kurt told Jason in a low voice. Said the space needs to justify its footprint by end of quarter, or they'll consider a shutdown. Jason's eyes widened. We're barely keeping it going as it is. That's the point, kid. Julian stepped in. What happens to everyone if the store closes? Kurt shrugged. They'll offer relocations. Maybe. But that just means adding stress to another team that's already drowning. Julian turned and caught Colby watching him from the back, arms folded across his chest. The man said nothing, just observed like the staff were zoo animals. By late afternoon, the pastry delivery still hadn't arrived. Kurt made a call, pacing between the supply shelf and the back door. Julian caught fragments. That's 3 days in a row. No, we can't sell empty trays. Yes, I know you're short-staffed too. Jason came over, voice low. We had to throw out milk last week. No one came to pick it up, and it spoiled. Julian narrowed his eyes. Did you tell anyone? Jason nodded. Sent a report. No response. Julian didn't ask who the report went to. He already knew. At 4:15, a delivery finally arrived. 1 crate of pastries, half of what was expected. No explanation. No apology. Julian helped unload it, then stepped out back for a moment of air. The alley smelled like damp cardboard and coffee grounds. He pulled out his phone and made a call.
Tony.
It's me. I want every maintenance ticket pulled for this location. I want to see when they were filed, what the response was, and who signed off on them. He listened for a moment.
No.
Not tomorrow. In the next hour. Then, he hung up. Back inside, Kurt handed Jason a mop to clean up a spill by the fridge. Jason nodded and started. Colby stepped out from the back and walked directly into the middle of the cafe, clapping once for attention. Team, I want to thank you for your efforts today, he said, voice falsely upbeat. We're reviewing some hard data right now, and there may be some restructuring in the near future. I suggest everyone keep their performance tight. Julian walked over before anyone could respond. Actually, I'd like to say something too. Colby turned, confused. I'm sorry, who are you again? Julian pulled the apron off and folded it once in his hands. Then he looked up.
I'm Julian Vega.
I own this company. The Café went silent. Jason's mop froze mid-swipe. Kurt's lips parted slightly, but he said nothing. Colby's face turned a shade paler. Julian stepped forward. I've been working in your stores for the past 5 days. I've seen broken machines, ignored safety issues, undertrained staff, and managers who threaten instead of support. He turned to Colby. You came here to observe. What exactly did you think you were seeing? Colby hesitated. I was following protocol. District requested a performance review. Performance review of who? Julian asked. Because from where I'm standing, the only ones performing are the people holding this place together with duct tape and overtime. Colby's jaw tightened. We've been stretched thin. Everyone's under pressure. Julian nodded once. Then you should have been here lifting, not watching. He turned to Kurt. You've been running this store without a manager for how long? 18 days. You've kept it open, made calls, tried to fix things with no help. That's leadership. Kurt looked down, unsure what to say. Julian turned back to Colby. You're done. Effective immediately. Your oversight ends here. Colby blinked. Julian, with respect, this is a regional issue. Julian cut in.
No.
This is a values issue. And you failed it. Colby opened his mouth again, but Julian was already turning away. He looked at the team. You've all held this place up with no support. That ends today. New equipment will be installed by next Monday. Supply schedules are being restructured with direct delivery accountability. And until we fill your staffing shortage, no one is working more than 5 days a week unless they volunteer. Jason finally spoke. So, we're not getting shut down. Julian shook his head. Not while people like you are running the floor.
He paused.
And Kurt, come to headquarters next week. I want to talk about a formal promotion. There was no applause. No dramatic music. Just slow, stunned nods and tired, but visible relief. Julian picked up a cleaning rag and walked back to the counter. He didn't need to be clapped on the back or thanked. He just needed to finish the shift. Julian stood in the hallway outside his office, watching through the glass as Lucy sat nervously at the conference table. She hadn't touched the tea someone had brought her. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, and she kept glancing at the door. He stepped in quietly and closed it behind him. Thanks for coming in, he said, pulling out the chair across from her. She nodded quickly, but didn't speak. Julian set a thin folder on the table. You don't need to worry. You're not in trouble. I asked you here because I saw something at the Maple and Six store that needs to be addressed, and I want to hear your experience directly. Lucy hesitated. Was this about the muffin? He nodded once.
Yes.
But not just that. She took a breath, then looked up. I didn't want to lie to her. I was taught to check the binder, but Jess jumped in, and... She stopped herself. I didn't know what to do. You did the right thing by hesitating, Julian said. That moment told me everything I needed to know about who was trying to protect people and who wasn't. Lucy finally leaned back in her seat, just slightly. Can I ask why you were there? She asked softly. I mean, working with us. Because I stopped trusting reports. I needed to see what we'd become. And I needed to see who was holding us together. She didn't answer, but the tension in her shoulders eased. Julian opened the folder. Jess is no longer with the company. Lucy blinked. Really?
Yes.
We have zero tolerance for putting customers at risk, and there were other issues I witnessed that confirmed it wasn't a one-time lapse. He slid a different sheet across the table. I'd like you to help train incoming staff. Not as a manager yet, but as a lead trainer. You'd work alongside a new leadership team I'm building, and I'd like your help developing a safer, clearer onboarding process. She stared at the paper. You don't have to answer now, Julian said. But I want you to know what you did mattered. You made a difference. Lucy gave a small nod, then quietly said, "Thank you." Later that day, Julian walked through the front door of the Broadway and Elm location unannounced. It was mid-afternoon, and the lull between lunch and evening rush left the cafe half full. Malik was at the espresso bar, adjusting the grind setting with calm precision. Ava leaned against the counter, flipping through the inventory clipboard. Neither of them noticed him at first. When they did, they froze. Julian raised a hand. "You're not in any trouble." Ava looked skeptical. "Then why are you here?" "To fix something I helped break." She narrowed her eyes. "You're the one who fired Devon." "Yes." Malik wiped his hands and came around the counter. "What happens now?" Julian motioned for them to join him at one of the nearby tables. "We're restructuring the entire management layer. I've pulled every complaint, every schedule, every equipment request." "Your store wasn't an outlier, it was a warning sign." Ava crossed her arms. "And what? You're just going to put someone else in here and hope they don't do the same thing?"
No.
"I'm assigning someone who came up through the floor. Someone who knows what it's like to be treated like a number."
He turned to Malik.
"I'd like you to take on an assistant manager trainee role. You're cautious. You listen. You don't chase credit." Malik blinked. "I've never managed before." "I'm not asking you to be perfect," Julian said. "I'm asking you to help build a team that doesn't need to recover from the boss when they go home." Ava looked at him. "And me? You're sharp. You manage the flow without needing to be loud. That's rare. I want you to help Malik recalibrate training. And if you're open to it, I'd like to review your application for district support once the new team stabilizes." Her eyebrows lifted. "Seriously? You've been doing the job already. I just didn't see it." She looked at Malik, then back at Julian. "All right. But I'm not sugarcoating anything." "I don't want sugar," Julian said. "I want honesty." The next morning, he arrived early at headquarters and walked into the operations wing where Tony was already at his desk, reviewing a spreadsheet. "Morning," Tony said cautiously. Julian dropped a packet of papers in front of him. "These are the new internal protocols. Maintenance requests now go directly to a centralized system with timestamp tracking. If a ticket is open longer than 72 hours, it's escalated automatically." Tony flipped through the pages. "That'll take reworking half the back end." "Then rework it." Julian sat down across from him. "Also, no more leadership hires from outside unless they've worked a floor position in the last 12 months. I want people who've stood behind a register before they stand behind a desk." Tony nodded slowly. "You're not rebuilding. You're gutting the middle." "I'm correcting it." Tony closed the folder and leaned back. "And the Pine and Hollis store?" "Already underway." Kurt's stepping into interim management. Full equipment replacement scheduled by next week. Staffing's still tight, but we've rerouted 2 part-timers from less impacted stores. "It'll hold for now." Tony hesitated, then asked, "What made you do this, Julian? I mean, really?" Julian didn't answer right away. He looked out the window behind Tony, where the early light was warming the tops of buildings. "There was a kid," he said quietly. 4 or 5 years old. Almost ate a muffin that could have sent him to the hospital. And the moment I froze, the second I realized I didn't know what was in my own store's food, I knew I'd failed." Tony looked down. Julian stood. "We're not going to be that company anymore." By the end of the week, the system had shifted. Each store received a direct line to a new rotating support lead, someone who had worked a cafe floor within the last year. Anonymous reporting tools were installed in the scheduling system, and every manager was evaluated not just on performance metrics, but on team retention and satisfaction. At the Maple and 6th location, a new manager named Rena took over. She brought pastries for her team every Monday and ran daily 5-minute debriefs to keep communication clear. Lucy began shadowing her during shifts, not with a clipboard, but with a quiet presence that made people feel heard. At Broadway and Elm, Malik stepped into his new role with quiet steadiness. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. When a customer snapped at a junior barista one morning, Malik stepped in, took the drink off the counter, and simply said, "We don't reward disrespect here. You're welcome to reorder." The customer left. The barista didn't forget it. At Pine and Hollis, the espresso machine was replaced. The crates arrived on time. And Kurt, now officially promoted, posted a handwritten note above the staff sink. "You're not invisible. I see you. And I've got your back." Julian visited each store quietly, never staying long. He didn't need applause. He wasn't interested in slogans or branding campaigns. He just watched. Watched the way people stood a little straighter. Watched how customers lingered longer, not because of the coffee, but because of the calm. And when he finally returned to his office one late Friday afternoon, he stood by the window, looking down at the street where it all began. No headlines. No cameras. Just a company finally acting like it remembered what it promised to be.